The moment you react, they win. That's how ego works. It's not looking for truth. It's not searching for connection. Ego is always scanning for control. It wants to see you flinch. It wants to provoke you into defending yourself, explaining yourself, justifying yourself. Because the second you do, you've already handed over your power. The strongest thing you can ever do in the presence of someone's inflated ego is to remain absolutely calm, unbothered, unshaken. The person trying to dominate you, manipulate you, break you, they aren't built for someone who doesn't flinch. They're used to being feared. They're used to people shrinking in their presence. They feed off that. But when you don't give it to them, when you hold your ground and don't blink, they start to unravel. Because control doesn't work on the grounded. This is not about being arrogant. It's about emotional command. When you know who you are, when you've already validated yourself, you don't need to defend your identity to someone trying to chip away at it. You don't need to match their volume. You don't need to match their energy. In fact, the most threatening thing to someone with a bloated ego is someone who doesn't need to get loud to be powerful. Someone who doesn't let pressure break their poise. There's a reason people try to provoke you. It's not random. They're trying to get a reaction so they can control the narrative. Don't give it to them. The moment you stay calm while someone is losing their mind trying to get under your skin, you've already won. People with fragile egos need chaos to feel strong. They need conflict to feel superior. They stir the pot and then point at your reaction to make you look unstable. Don't let them pull you into their storm. Your power is in your stillness. It's in your restraint. Because when you stay unfazed, you force them to deal with the discomfort of their own behavior. You hold up a mirror without saying a word. And that kind of reflection is painful for people who've never been held accountable. They'll try harder. They'll press every button. But you stay still. You respond, you don't react. Because your identity doesn't hang on their approval. That's strength. That's dominance without aggression. See, ego is noisy. It needs to be right. It needs to be praised. It needs attention. You take that away and it starts to collapse. The quieter you become, the more they reveal themselves. Don't fight to prove yourself to someone who's already decided they're better than you. Let them talk. Let them posture. Let them swing. You just keep standing. That posture, that silence, it breaks more egos than arguments ever will. When they realize they can't control you, they'll either escalate or retreat. Either way, they lose control. And that's the one thing their ego can't tolerate. You don't have to win with words. You win with presence. You win with the discipline not to play their game. Because anyone can scream. Anyone can argue. It takes strength to stay composed. It takes power to listen without agreeing, to walk away without explaining, to be disrespected without becoming disrespectful. That's where real dominance lives, not in the noise, but in the silence that says, I don't need to prove myself to you. That silence is louder than rage. It's louder than insult, and it cuts deeper. Because ego doesn't understand quiet confidence. It only knows how to fight with force, not how to outlast self-mastery. When you stay unfazed, you don't just protect your peace, you dismantle their performance. Because most of what ego does is for show, for attention, for reaction. When it doesn't get that, it starts to crumble under its own weight. You'll see it. The shift, the discomfort, the confusion. They'll wonder why their usual tactics aren't working. They'll question themselves. That's what happens when you don't feed the need for control. You expose it, you starve it, and in that space you reclaim your power, not by overpowering, but by refusing to be overpowered. Let them be loud. Let them flex. Let them perform. You stay rooted. Stay calm. Stay silent when you need to. That's how you break ego without ever raising your voice. That's how you show strength without ever needing to display it. Because the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one yelling. It's the one who's watching quietly, unmoved, untouched, unshaken. People misunderstand silence because they confuse it with weakness. But silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful psychological weapons you can carry. You don't always need to speak to be heard. You don't always need to shout to set a boundary. Silence can do what words can't. It makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to face themselves, especially arrogant people. They are used to being responded to, admired, feared. When they speak, they expect the room to adjust. So when someone doesn't react, when someone refuses to play into their performance, they feel it like a slap. Arrogance thrives in attention. The minute you remove that attention, it has nowhere to go. It scrambles to reclaim the space. It gets louder, meaner, more demanding, and that's when it exposes itself. Because people who are truly confident don't need to dominate conversations or suck the air out of every room. The ones who do, they're not powerful. They're insecure. That's why silence is strategic. It reveals what's underneath the surface. If someone needs to be the loudest, most controlling, most admired person in the room, your silence will be unbearable to them. They'll squirm in it, and that's how you get the upper hand. Not by overpowering, but by letting their ego collapse under its own weight. You don't need to match their intensity. In fact, you win by refusing to. The moment you stay quiet while they rant, posture, and try to provoke a reaction from you, you are commanding the space without saying a word. Because silence communicates strength. It says, I hear you, but I don't need to respond. I see you, but I won't give you access. That unsettles people who are used to controlling others through intimidation or manipulation. It makes them question their grip. And if you do speak, you choose your moment. You let silence do the heavy lifting. And when you speak, it lands with twice the weight. Because people have been waiting for it. That's not surrender. That's calculated force. Arrogant people are often not looking for conversations. They're looking for control. They talk over you. They dismiss you. They dominate. So the worst thing you can do is keep feeding them words to play with. Don't hand them more rope to twist around your neck. Go silent. Not because you're scared, but because you're done handing over your power. Every time you choose silence instead of arguing back, you are building emotional discipline. And they feel that. They may not say it, but they feel it. Your silence disrupts their entire game. Think about the people in your life who talk the most but say the least. The ones who make everything about them. The ones who always need an audience. How many of them actually listen? How many of them genuinely ask questions, wait for answers, care about truth? Few, if any. And that's why your silence is a threat, because it's a refusal to engage in their illusion. It says, you don't control this moment. I do. It says, your energy doesn't set my tone. I do. And that kind of control is something arrogant people can't take. Because it's not something they can fight. You can't argue with silence. You can't manipulate someone who refuses to react. The most powerful people aren't the ones who speak the most. They're the ones who know when not to. They don't waste energy trying to prove themselves to someone who won't respect it. They don't entertain chaos disguised as confidence. They observe, they wait. And when they do speak, it's not out of emotion. It's out of clarity. That's how you become untouchable. Not by always having the last word, but by knowing when no words are necessary at all. Sometimes silence is your boundary. It's how you say, I'm not playing this game with you. It's how you say, I see through the show. And the ones who rely on power plays, on theatrics, on volume, they won't know what to do with that. Because they're expecting fire and you give them stillness. They're expecting war and you give them a locked door. It's not surrender. It's the highest form of control. You walk away. You hold your line. You let them rage in their echo chamber while you keep building your life in peace. That's how you win. Quietly. Strategically. Completely. When someone comes at you with arrogance or manipulation, your best weapon isn't to fight fire with fire. It's not to scream louder or cut deeper with your words. That's exactly what they expect. That's what they feed off. If you want to dismantle someone who leads with ego, you don't insult them. You tell the truth clearly, calmly, directly, and then you walk away. Because truth, when delivered with no emotional charge, with no apology, hits harder than any insult ever could. It doesn't burn fast and fizzle out. It lands and lingers. It echoes. The problem with insults is they're emotional. They're reactive. And the moment you insult someone, they dismiss you. They say you're triggered, you're dramatic, you're unstable. They use your emotion to invalidate your point. But when you speak truth without a flinch, without a raised voice, without even blinking, they have nothing to attack. They have to sit with it. And that's where your power is. Not in being louder, but in being unshakable while delivering something they can't unhear. It's not about being cruel. It's about being clear. Most people don't know how to handle clarity. They're used to confusion, mixed signals, passive aggression. So when you calmly tell someone exactly what they are, what they did, and what it caused without emotion, you leave them exposed. And people hate being exposed, especially people who live behind the mask of pride. They don't know what to do when you say something real and walk away. They expect chaos. You give them composure. They expect argument. You give them facts. That imbalance of control drives them wild because it reveals who's really centered. And it's not them. When you deal with difficult people, especially the toxic or manipulative kind, they expect you to lose it. That's part of their playbook. They poke, they prod, they twist your words just to get a rise. And once they get it, they paint you as the problem. So don't give them that chance. Tell the truth, not to hurt, but to free yourself. Truth is a form of exit. It's the sentence that closes the chapter. When you say, "This behavior is not acceptable to me," and you say it without flinching, it creates a psychological line they can't cross. Not because you asked them not to, but because they know you meant it. Most people lie to protect egos. Not just the ego of others, but their own. They lie by softening their boundaries, by staying quiet when something is wrong, by pretending things don't hurt. But every time you do that, you reinforce the behavior you're trying to survive. You keep the cycle spinning. Truth breaks it. It's the reset, even if it shakes things up, especially when it does. Because when you're dealing with someone who's used to overpowering others, you don't match their aggression, you reveal their pattern. You hold the mirror. And you do it without flinching. Here's the trick. Don't aim to hurt, aim to reveal. That's what stings. When someone's behavior is exposed and you don't even raise your voice, that's not weakness, that's self-command. You're no longer trying to win them over. You're not asking for change. You're simply stating what is. And that level of certainty forces people to meet themselves. Some will lash out, some will collapse, some will try to gaslight you, distract you, guilt trip you. Let them. Stay centered. Because when you know you're speaking from a place of truth, not pain, not revenge, you don't need to defend it. The most powerful person in any confrontation is the one who doesn't need it. The one who could destroy with words but chooses instead to clarify. And if someone can't handle your truth, that's not your burden. That's their exposure. That's the space where either accountability grows or ego implodes. And either way, it's not your job to rescue them from that process. Let them sit in it, let them grow from it, or let them spiral. That's on them. You don't need to manage anyone's discomfort when all you did was tell the truth, so the next time someone pushes you to the edge, don't go off. Don't lose your composure. Look them straight in the eye and say the one thing they need to hear. The one thing that strips away the performance. Then walk away. Say it once. Say it clear and say nothing else. Because the truth doesn't need to scream to echo forever. There will come a moment when someone will question your value. Not because it's missing, but because they want to see if you'll hand it over. They'll test your boundaries, minimize your voice, mock your standards, and wait to see how low you're willing to stoop to stay in their favor. That's when your silence becomes a weapon and your absence becomes your loudest answer. Never argue for your worth. It's not a courtroom and you're not on trial. You are the standard. You are the gate. And not everyone deserves access. The second you start explaining your value to someone who's already made up their mind to misunderstand it, you've lost power. Not because you're wrong, but because now you've entered a negotiation over something that should be non-negotiable. Respect doesn't come from explanation. It comes from energy. From how quickly you're willing to walk away when it's not given. Because people may not hear what you say, but they'll never forget what you tolerate. Every time you accept less, you train them to give you less. Every time you stay in rooms where you're not respected, you teach them you'll settle for presence instead of dignity. Sometimes people don't mistreat you because they don't see your value. They do it because they think you don't, and they're waiting for confirmation. Waiting for you to explain, defend, or break. Don't. The most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to undermine you is refuse to participate in their game. You don't play to win. You end the game altogether. You close the door, reclaim your peace, and redirect your energy back to your purpose. That's how you starve toxicity. Not by fighting it, by outgrowing it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for leveling up, for demanding better, for leaving conversations that belittle you. You don't need to announce your standards. Just embody them. When you respect yourself out loud, the wrong people will feel uncomfortable. Let them. You're not here to make arrogance feel safe. You're not here to babysit insecurity. You're here to lead yourself. And sometimes leadership means having the courage to cut ties with those who can't meet you at the level you've fought to reach. People will call you difficult when you stop being easy to manipulate. They'll call you cold when you stop overextending. They'll call you selfish when you start choosing yourself. Let them talk. That's how you know the boundary is working. Because when you refuse to keep shrinking just to make others comfortable, the only people who complain are the ones who benefited from your silence. You don't demand space. You create it by walking like you already own the ground beneath you. When someone treats you like you're replaceable, let them try. And while they're out searching for your copy, you'll be too busy evolving into someone they'll never understand. That's what happens when you stop explaining your worth and start enforcing it. You stop wasting time on people who need convincing. You start attracting those who already know. You become someone who doesn't chase respect. You magnetize it, never beg someone to see you clearly. If they choose to blur your light, hand them darkness. If they question your strength, stop showing them your scars and start showing them your back. Walk away. Not in anger, not in arrogance, but in clarity, in truth, in quiet power. Because once you know your worth, your time becomes sacred. Your peace becomes non-negotiable, and your presence becomes a privilege, not a guarantee. When people show you who they are, don't paint over it with potential. Stop hoping for change in patterns that have proven themselves. Trust the data, respect the evidence, and instead of arguing for your value, ask why you felt the need to. That's where healing begins. When you realize your value isn't up for debate, when you stop treating your worth like a discussion and start treating it like a boundary, there will be people who try to guilt you for walking away, for choosing distance over drama. But just because someone wants access to you doesn't mean they've earned it. Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. Peace doesn't mean permission. You can wish someone well and still never let them near you again. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom. That's power. That's what happens when you no longer feel the need to be understood in places you were never meant to belong. Dominance is loud. It interrupts, shouts, threatens, and postures. It wants to be seen. It wants to intimidate. It feeds on the illusion of control. But emotional intelligence doesn't react, it reads. It waits. It listens deeper than words. When someone enters a room and tries to assert power through aggression or manipulation, a person with emotional intelligence doesn't flinch. They don't fight back in the same language. They don't try to out-shout, out-blame, or out-intimidate. They stay calm, and that calmness confuses dominance. It derails it. Because emotional intelligence isn't about avoiding confrontation. It's about winning it without lowering your standard. The reason dominance crumbles in front of emotional intelligence is simple. It's not built on substance. It's built on insecurity disguised as authority. Emotional intelligence sees that right away. It doesn't waste energy arguing with projection. It doesn't take the bait when someone's ego swings for reaction. It studies the patterns. It catches the micro-expressions, the shifts in tone, the need to prove something. And instead of reacting, it begins to lead. Quietly. Effectively. Because when you master your emotions, you automatically take control of the room. A dominant person might be able to silence people with volume. They might even convince others to second-guess themselves. But someone with emotional intelligence doesn't get pulled into the storm. They stay rooted. They stay intentional. They know the difference between someone having a strong opinion and someone trying to control a narrative. They know when someone's tone is meant to intimidate. And they don't fall for it. Because emotional intelligence is not about being soft. It's about being sharp. It's about using your awareness like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. You'll notice something when you stop reacting emotionally to dominant people. They start to lose grip. Because control doesn't work unless it creates a response. They want to see fear. They want to see confusion. They want to provoke you into saying something you can't take back. But when you respond with precision, with patience, and with poise, it's like showing them a mirror they weren't ready to look into. It makes them uncomfortable, not because you attacked them, but because you didn't give them the fight they were hoping for. You don't need to match someone's energy just to be heard. That's a myth. Real strength doesn't echo weakness. It redefines the conversation entirely. Emotional intelligence asks what's really happening here. Is this person loud because they feel invisible? Are they demanding control because they fear losing it? Are they insulting others to distract from their own inadequacy? That's the lens emotional intelligence looks through. It removes ego from the situation, and in doing so, it exposes everyone else's. Dominant people thrive in emotionally reactive environments. They stir chaos because it gives them space to maneuver, to manipulate, to redirect blame. But when you show up with calm clarity, when your voice is steady, when your presence doesn't rise to meet the fire, but puts it out with grounded awareness, you dismantle that dynamic. You replace confusion with clarity. You trade reactivity for strategy. And in that shift, power returns to its rightful place, not with the loudest, but with the most self-controlled. The truth is, emotional intelligence isn't about always being kind or agreeable. It's knowing when someone is trying to dominate a situation through fear or force and choosing not to feed that system. It's setting a boundary without raising your voice. It's calling out manipulation with facts instead of frustration. It's exiting conversations that are designed to provoke, not solve. It's saying less, but meaning more. Because when you know who you are and you know how to manage your state, you become immune to emotional ambushes. There's a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally hijacked. Emotional intelligence protects that line. It sees the traps. It watches the patterns. It understands that not every confrontation is meant to be engaged with. Sometimes power is knowing exactly when to speak, how to speak, and when to walk away. Because you don't need to dominate the conversation when you already control yourself. You don't need to win every argument when peace is already yours. The person who remains calm under fire becomes the leader in the room, whether they're the loudest or not, because the one who can observe chaos without becoming it has already won. There is a kind of power that never announces itself. It doesn't speak louder. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't play the game the way others expect. It just removes its energy. And in doing that, it exposes everything. The ego feeds on reaction. That's its oxygen. It needs to provoke. It needs attention, validation, resistance, debate, argument. Because if you're reacting, then it still controls the narrative. When you withdraw your reaction, you're not being passive. You're applying psychological pressure in its purest form. Silence is not weakness. Silence is awareness with boundaries. When someone tries to get under your skin, when they throw insults disguised as jokes, when they challenge your competence, when they criticize you in public, they are looking for a spark. And most people give it to them. Most people defend, explain, retaliate. But what happens when you simply don't engage? When your body doesn't flinch? When your tone doesn't rise? When your expression stays grounded? When your attention stays fixed on what actually matters? You shift the balance of power without saying a word. You can break a manipulator's pattern by breaking your own. The reason toxic people keep winning is because they rely on your predictability. They know exactly how to push you. They know what words sting, what tones trigger you, what lies make you panic. But when you become unreadable, when you stop playing into their script, you disrupt the cycle. You show them they can't reach you anymore. That their tactics have expired. That their games no longer land where they used to. And that destroys their illusion of control. To ignore with intention is not about pretending someone doesn't exist. It's about choosing what no longer deserves access to your emotional space. It's telling yourself, I don't